Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. We have another bag project for you today. This one was a request that was left in the comments section of one of my previous videos. Today we're going to be making a sling bag, or like a boho slouchy type of bag. One shoulder strap, no zips, one pocket, and it's quite simple really. Here it is. We do have small box corners at the base there, big opening, and this section here that will sit over your shoulders. Fully lined, and it also has a pocket on the inside as well. So come along and I will show you how to quickly make this up. It's actually a really quick project. I'm also going to show you how to draft a pattern for this. We'll draft the pattern onto paper and then we can transfer it onto our fabric. Let's get to it. Let's start by drafting our pattern first. I have just a big sheet of brown paper. You can use a lightweight sew-on interfacing as well. I do use that for a lot of my dressmaking patterns, but any big piece of paper that you can find and draw on, you can use. I do already have one straight edge, which is really handy. I'm going to place my ruler on the very edge, and the sheet that you need wants to be at least 28 inches or about 75 centimetres. I'm going to mark a line going across here, and we only need to come out about 8 inches. I've marked a line at 8 inches or 20 centimetres, and I'm also going to make another mark at 1.5 inches or 4 centimetres. From this line down, we're going to measure 28 inches, and I'll line up the straight edge of the ruler once again with the straight edge of the paper, and I'll come out 8 inches or 20 centimetres, which is the same measurement that we have at the top. This is going to be the top of our bag, and this will be the bottom. From the bottom, we're going to come up 12 inches, and I'm using the straight line along here to give me a nice square edge up here. So let's go 12 inches, which is about 30 centimetres. These measurements don't have to be perfect either. This is just a basic shape of a sling bag. All we need to do now is mark a curve along here. You can do that freehand, but if you have a French curve ruler, that will help you. So I'm going to start off with a basic curve shape around about here. This obviously isn't long enough. I'll start at this end here. And meet up with that. And if you want to shape it a little bit more, you can do that. So I might come in a little bit. And once you're happy with that, you can cut it out. And there we have the basic pattern for our sling bag. I'm going to mark a few reference lines just for myself in case I make one of these again in the future. This is half the pattern. We're going to place our pattern on the folded edge of our fabric, so I know I need a fold here. When there's a fold, you know that that's a straight grain of your fabric, but if you need to, you can also mark a grain line that will be parallel to the folded edge. So this is the grain line. We've got 12 inches or 30 centimetres. What did we have here? That was 8 inches or 20 centimetres. And here we had 28 inches, which was 71 centimetres. All right, now we're ready to place this on our fabric, cut it out and sew it together. These are the two pieces I'm using for the bag today. That will be the outer fabric, this will be the lining. I'm going to place the two layers together, but I'll have the fabric folded in half as well. What I've done here is ironed my fabric pieces, and I've placed one on top of the other. Whilst doing that, I've folded the outer fabric over so that I have a nice straight edge here, and I've made sure that there's enough room for my pattern to fit on that. And I've done the same with the lining. So I have the lining folded over by at least 8 inches to be able to fit my pattern. I've got the folded edge along here for both pieces, and I'll place my pattern directly over the top, and I'll line up the straight edge of the pattern over the folds in the fabric. And we can cut this out. And we can cut straight along the edge of the paper because this does include the seam allowance. You'll actually want to have 2 pieces of each. So what we're cutting out now is just one side of the lining, one side of the outer fabric. We'll need to do that twice. Once you've cut out your fabric from the pattern that you have, open that out. We need 2 for the lining, and then we have 2 pieces for the outer fabric. And I've decided I'm going to put a pocket on the inside of the lining as well. Now, I'm not stabilising this bag. I just want it to be a nice, soft, flowy, slouchy type of bag. Normally, if you're going to put pockets in, you would want to stabilise it. But I'm going to be a bit of a rebel today and not do that. So the pocket piece that we're going to have will go in here. Here's your materials list. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is prepare our pocket. I've put all my information onto my pattern piece as well, so if I decide I want to make these again in the future, everything's there. So I can just roll that up and store it away somewhere. Take your pocket piece. We've got 8 inches or 20 centimetres across this way. Bring the fabric up, fold it in half. We're going to sew from the fold up to the end there and across. Leave an opening here for turning through. Let's go do that now. I'll start sewing at the fold with a back stitch. And I'll stop here where I want to leave my opening with a back stitch. I'll move forward a bit. You don't need to leave much room at all, just 2 or 3 fingers width. Back stitch here. Once you've done that, we'll trim our corners. Turn this the right way around, and then I'm going to take this to the iron and give it a really good press. Alright, I've got the edges all neatly pressed. There's our little opening in here. Go back to the top edge and we'll top stitch. Okay, we've got our pocket done. There's a little opening along the bottom. We'll close that up when we put that on the lining. We can grab our lining pieces now, and we need to place a pocket onto our bag, but this is going to be the side of our bag. The side seams will be the front. So place your linings with the printed sides facing, and we're going to sew just one seam all the way down. We'll do this one later. Let's go and sew that seam now. I'm just using a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance for this project today. The one side seam has been done. I've also gone and pressed the seams open on the side there. It doesn't really matter whether you have the seams open or pressed to one side. It's personal choice. But there's our seam along here, and we can place our pocket over the centre of that. Let's fold this in half and find the centre. There's our centre marking, and we've got the seam line here. Place a pocket directly over the top. I'll line the pocket up so that it sits about 3 inches or 8 centimetres from the curve at the top here. And now we can take that to the machine, sew down the side, along the bottom, up the side again. That will close up the opening that we have in the fabric here, and we'll leave this unstitched. I often like to leave channels in my pockets, so once I've stitched this in place, I'll just come along here about 1 inch from the side and sew a straight line going across here, and that just enables me to sit a pen of some sort in there. Okay, we can backstitch at the top. I like to reinforce this area as well. Once I've secured that pocket, I'll start at the bottom edge. I'll just sew another straight line right across. All right, there's our pocket in place. Got a good little opening here and another one here so that I can put a biro. Now we can close up the other side seam, bring the edges together, and I'm going to leave an opening on the side of my bag rather than having it at the bottom. I'm going to leave it right here, so that's about a hand's width. Start sewing at one end, come down and backstitch, leave this open, backstitch and end here. That's for our lining, and with our outer fabric we can sew up both side seams together. Place your fabric with the right sides facing. Okay, so that's been pinned together. We're only sewing up the side seams. We don't want to sew up these curved edges or the top yet, and we'll do the last seam on the lining as well. Let's do that now. I'll backstitch here, end my work, move on up a little bit, backstitch, and continue to the end. And for the outer fabric, we're going to sew straight down both sides. All right, the side seams are done now. I've pressed the seams open for both pieces, and what we can do now is place the two bag pieces inside one another. It doesn't matter whether you have your lining on the outside or on the inside. Turn your lining so that it's facing the right way out. And we want our outer fabric inside out. I'll line it up so that I've got the seam facing up, and I'll place this lining inside the outer fabric. We'll pin those two seams together. This will just make it easier to line everything up at the top. Turn it around and we'll do the other side as well. And then just shake it out to line up all the bits at the top. So now what we've got is the curved edge of our fabric with right sides facing, and we're going to pin this together. If your fabric isn't quite even, because one of mine was a lot more flimsy than the other, I'm just going to trim off a little bit of the excess and start pinning that together. Now I'm not going to sew from the very top all the way down and around. We're going to leave a gap at the top, so let's just put a pin 2 inches from the shoulder. Repeat that for the other side as well. So once again, it's just pinning at 2 inches or 5 centimetres. There's no hard and fast rule as to how low down you want to start pinning. This is just to make it a little bit easier when we do the final process later. So the more room you leave on the shoulder area, the easier it is for you to manipulate or manoeuvre your fabric. So these are the shoulder sections here. We need to pin all the layers of the curve together on both sides. I'll do that now. We've got our lining, the outer fabric, everything's pinned on the curve here. Come around What we're going to do now is start from the top of the shoulder here where the first pin mark is. We'll sew all the way down to the intersecting seam, keep on going all the way up. Once you've done that side, you can turn around and do exactly the same for the other side. And I'm using the same 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance. You can use less if that's what you like. And backstitch here. That's one side done, let's do the other. All right, we've done that. The next thing we need to do is clip our curves. Now you only need to clip the curved area, you don't need to clip anything that's straight. Just make a few nicks in your fabric without cutting through the stitching line. Come around to the other side. I'm going to turn this the right way around. Go and give this a really good press so that you can have nice edges. We will be top stitching shortly, but first we have to connect the shoulder straps. So you want to have the outer fabric on the inside of the bag. Bring the edges of the shoulder together. Move the lining out of the way on both sides. And all you want to do is line up the top edge of the outer fabric. Let's take that to the machine and sew straight across. Remember to keep your lining fabric out of the way. That's one of the reasons why we left a couple of inches of space. I've gone and pressed that shoulder seam open. What you need to do now to close up the lining is just bring your hand in between the layers of fabric until your fingers come out at the other end and grab the lining piece on this side and this side. Pinch them both together and feed it through that shoulder strap and bring it out the other side. You won't be able to turn the bag inside out all the way to do this part of the shoulder strap. So underneath here we've got the shoulder seam for the outer fabric sewn together. This is a little bit fiddly to manipulate. But pin that together and sew straight across there. So I'm going to show you this one more time. You've got the shoulder closed up on the outer fabric. The lining pieces are here. This lining piece needs to feed into this tube here, and this lining piece also needs to feed through that tube. It doesn't matter whether you use that side or the other side, the same thing needs to happen. So I'm just running my hand up on the inside until I can't go any further. I'll grab this piece of lining and the other one and bring that through the fabric. And then line up the top shoulder sections. Let's sew that one closed. I've accidentally gone and sewn my face instead of the fabric. I forgot to turn my camera around. All you need to do is stitch straight down here with a back stitch at the beginning and the end. And it's a little bit awkward to iron this one. So all I'll do is bring my fingers through, open out the fabric and the seams, and I'll finger press that nice and flat. That'll be enough for that. We've got the 2 shoulder seams sewn together at the top here. We still have this opening to close up along here. Now there's 2 ways you can do this, so I'm going to turn this the right way out first and show you the easy way. So just pull that fabric and you can see that I've got an opening along here and on this side. You can just pinch the edges together because this does need top stitching. So you can just go and pinch the edges together and then top stitch all the way around this side and around the other side. But I'm going to show you how to do this the way you would do it if you were dressmaking. So if you were closing up shoulder seams on a summer dress, we go back into the shoulder strap just like we did before and bring this fabric through. We've got the 2 seams separated here, and what you would do is keep the fabric out of the way here and just continue on and sew this seam and as you're going along with your machine you'll start sewing here and you just keep on pulling this fabric through the tube until you can get all of this opening lined up together and close it up. So that's the top of the shoulder where we stopped sewing earlier. You can start here, sew across the shoulder seam, continue on until you get to the other side of the strap. That will close up one side. Then you can go to the other side and do the same thing. Just make sure you've got that bit of fabric that's on the inside out of the way. And this side is ready to be stitched as well. So let's go back to the machine. We'll start around about here, continue on to the other side. Then we'll do the other side of the shoulder strap. As you're sewing that, just make sure that the bulk of the fabric that's sitting on the inside, it's like a sausage inside a skin. Make sure the bulk of that fabric is out of your stitching area. I'll start a little bit further back from the last bit of stitching that we've got there. And you can see the fabric inside the tube here. You can just pull that forward, just like when we're sewing up scrunchies. And that will give you a little bit more room to work with. And I'll meet up with the stitching from the other side. Back stitch. That's one side done. I can turn that around and do the same on this side. Just feel the fabric to make sure that there's no lumps underneath from the bulk of the fabric you have inside. And that's your shoulder done. So if you turn that the right way out, you'll see the top of the shoulder finished nicely there. So as I said, you could have just folded the edges under, clipped it together and top stitched all the way around. That's the quick and easy way to do it. But if you want a really nice neat finish, sewing it from the inside looks much nicer. We do still need to top stitch this, but we'll do that at the end. Let's turn our bag inside out again. We need to line up the bottom edges. So we want to line up this seam with this seam underneath. So these are not side seams, they're seams in the centre of the bag. All right, we've got the bottom edge pinned together here. The seam along the middle there is matching up with the seam along the middle on the other side. So this will become the front and back of our bag, and this will be the side of the bag. Flip around to the other side, and we've got to put our linings together as well. Pop your handles to the inside, and we can close up this whole bottom section. Remember, on this side we've actually left an opening for turning the bag through later on. So we can go and match up the seams in the middle there and pin that together. Let's go and sew across here and the outer fabric. Alright, the lining's done. Let's do the other side. Back stitch on the fold. I've got the seam in the middle here. I always like to triple stitch over that. I've just got a thing about seams unravelling. At this point you can leave the bag sitting nice and flat, and it will just be a really flat sling bag close to your body. I'm going to box my corners though. From the stitching line I'm going to mark 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres, and also the fold line on the side. Repeat for the other side. And for the purpose of this video, I'll flip the fabric over and I'll mark that same box corner on the other side of the lining. Separate the front from the back and open that out until it becomes a triangle or a point. That blue line that I've got across here is that 1 inch square that we've made, and you want to line up the corner on both sides, and you can see that gives you a nice straight line on both sides. That straight line will become our stitching line. Repeat for the other side. Find the corner of that box we've marked. Same on this side, and you've got a nice straight line across there. That's for the lining. We will repeat that for the outer fabric as well. It's very difficult to see the square I've marked out on this fabric because it's so dark. I have just made a white outline here, and it's important to take your measurement from the stitching line, not from the frayed edge at the bottom here. So the stitching line and the folded edge are where you take your measurements from. Match up those points, and we can sew those in place as well. Let's do that now. Before we turn this the right way out, I'm going to grab the 2 triangles on these 2 ends and bring them together, and I'll join those 2 pieces and sew straight across that stitching line we've already done. Go to the other side, grab this corner and this one, bring them together, then we can sew across, and the lining will be nicely secured to the bottom of the bag. So all we're doing here is sewing straight over the 2 seams that we've already sewn, connecting the lining and the outer. Okay, our triangle pieces are connected at the bottom, so now our lining and our outer fabric are secured together. The lining's not going to move around inside the bag. It's up to you if you want to cut off the triangles. This is such a flimsy fabric. It frays a lot. It's very, very soft and flowy. So I'd rather not cut off those corners. I'm just going to leave it as it is. It's sitting inside the lining, so it really doesn't matter. And if it bothers you, you can go and overlock or serge the edges as well, or just zigzag them. Let's find the opening and we can pull the bag through. And when you've turned everything the right way out, this little opening we've got here, it will be on the front or back of your bag rather than at the bottom. Just pinch the edges together and you can quickly go and top stitch that section closed. Okay, that opening has been closed up. Let's turn this the right way out. Neaten up your corners. Okay, this is looking pretty snazzy, I think. All that's left for us to do is to top stitch. So if you decided you didn't want to do your shoulder section the way I showed you earlier, you would go and clip all your edges together and then top stitch all the way around. Because I've done that already, I can just take this straight to the machine and top stitch. And I'll be doing that with the outer fabric faced up. Let's go and do that. We'll do that on both sides. I'm starting the top stitch up at the shoulder seam at the top here. And as I come around the curve, I'll just manipulate that fabric so that the lining sits underneath. And once you get back to the beginning back stitch, that's one side of the shoulder strap done. We can do the other now. Flip it over, and once again I'll start on the shoulder seam. And there we have our finished bag. You've got a couple of little box corners at the bottom here and your shoulder strap that comes up around the side here. Something I should have mentioned as we were sewing the fabric together, because you're working with curves, it's very easy to distort the fabric and it'll stretch out of shape. So when you sew the fabric pieces together, you want to be really careful sewing two layers together that you don't stretch your fabric as you're going. So if you stretch or pull your fabric, you're going to distort it and it's going to be very wavy. And even if you don't do that, it may still be a little bit wavy when you finish doing the top stitching. Give it a really good press. That should help everything. Do be very careful when you're sewing the curved edge here that you don't pull your fabric as you're sewing it up. Isn't this fabric absolutely beautiful? I've had it for a little while, and because the flowers are so big, I haven't known what to put it with, but I think this bag is perfect for it. You can just sit it over your shoulders like this and you've got easy access to whatever you might need in there. Now it does sit nicely just on the side of you with your arm over the top. If you feel as though you need to close this, you can easily add a magnetic closure to it, or even sew a piece of Velcro to the inside of the bag as well. That'll give you a little bit of extra security. So from one pattern piece, we've been able to make a very functional bag. It's nice and floppy. This is exactly the way I wanted it. If you want to have some more stability to it, go and put some fusible stabilizer in there, or even just an iron-on interfacing that'll give it a little bit of body without too much. This one's a nice lightweight bag. Everybody's favourite question is, am I going to put them in the shop to sell? No, I'm not. This was just a request. I do like to do just random videos. I don't need to sell absolutely everything in the shop. I've got way too many bags, said no girl ever. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.